The iron gates opened with a slow, mechanical groan that seemed to echo Natalie Foster's nervousness. She stood at the entrance of the Ashford estate, her cleaning supplies clutched in both hands, staring at the mansion that would become her workplace for the next 5 years. The building rose before her like something from another world. All gray stone and tall windows that reflected the morning clouds. Her worn sneakers fell out of place on the perfect cobblestone driveway. Linda Morrison. The estate manager greeted her with a firm handshake and a list of rules. No speaking unless spoken to. No touching personal items. No entering the West Wing. Natalie nodded to each instruction, memorizing them like prayers. She needed this job too desperately to make mistakes. Grace's hospital bills had piled up like autumn leaves, and their small apartment felt like it was closing in with every unpaid notice that arrived. The man. Behind the walls, Vincent Ashford was a ghost in his own home. Natalie would catch glimpses of him, tall figure in expensive suits moving through hallways, always on his phone, always distant. His face carried the kind of tiredness that sleep could not fix. The house staff whispered that he had lost his wife and son in an accident 3 years ago, and since then, he had built walls higher than the ones surrounding his property. For the first 6 months, Vincent never looked at Natalie directly. She was part of the furniture, invisible hands that kept his world polished and ordered. She learned his patterns the way sailors learned the sea. He drank black coffee at 6 in the morning. He worked in his study until midnight. He never ate the meals the cook prepared, leaving them untouched on the dining table like offerings to ghosts. Hidden observations. What Vincent did not know was that Natalie saw everything. She saw the way he paused at his son's bedroom door, but never opened it. She noticed the photograph he kept face down in his study, the one he would sometimes pick up when he thought no one was watching. She understood the language of grief because she spoke it fluently herself. Their mother had passed 2 years ago, leaving Natalie to raise Grace alone while juggling 3 jobs in the library, where sunlight painted golden squares on the carpet. Natalie would find books left open on the armchair, poetry mostly, the kind that spoke of loss and longing. She would dust around them carefully, reading a few lines when time allowed. Once she found a page marked with dried tears. The stain had warped the paper. Something in her chest cracked at the thought of this powerful man crying alone in the dark. The routine days became weeks. Weeks became months. Natalie moved through the mansion like water, adapting to every corner and shadow. She learned which floorboards creaked and avoided them when Vincent was sleeping. She discovered his preference for lavender-scented cleaning products because they reminded him of his wife's garden. Small details became her way of showing care in a place where words were forbidden. Vincent's business partner, Robert, would sometimes visit for meetings. Natalie would hear their conversations drift through the halls, talks of investments and expansions, of numbers that meant nothing to her but seemed to weigh heavily on Vincent. Robert would laugh loudly, filling the empty spaces with noise, but Vincent's responses were always measured and quiet. The shift. It was a Tuesday in October when something changed. Natalie was cleaning the study, moving carefully around Vincent's desk where he sat working. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the 3rd time that hour. She ignored it, focusing on the bookshelf, but her hands trembled slightly. Grace had been feeling worse lately, and the doctors wanted more tests they could not afford. The phone buzzed again. And again. Finally, Vincent looked up from his laptop. His eyes, gray like winter storms, fixed on her for the first time, not through her, but at her. Seeing her as a person rather than a service. "You should answer that," he said. His voice was deeper than she expected, textured with disuse. Natalie's throat went dry. "I apologize, Mr. Ashford. It will not happen again." "That was not a criticism," Vincent replied, returning to his screen. "Just an observation." She stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to respond. In 18 months of working there, he had never addressed her directly. The words felt like an acknowledgement of her existence, small but significant. Breaking protocol that evening. As Natalie prepared to leave, she found an envelope on the hall table near the exit. Her name was written on it in elegant handwriting. Inside was her weekly payment, but also an additional amount, enough to cover Grace's upcoming tests. No note, no explanation. Just the money and the faint scent of his cologne on the paper, Her heart hammered as she looked back at the mansion. Through the study window, she could see Vincent's silhouette, still working, still alone. Something inside her shifted, like a door opening just a crack. She wanted to march back in and demand why. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to understand this man who lived like a prisoner in his own palace. Instead, she clutched the envelope and walked home through the cooling night. Grace was waiting, and hope was a luxury they had forgotten. But maybe, just maybe, it was returning. Behind his desk, Vincent closed his laptop and rubbed his tired eyes. He had seen the fear in her face when her phone kept ringing. He recognized it because he had worn that same expression once when the hospital called about Catherine and Thomas. Some pains were universal, and money was just paper unless it served a purpose beyond counting. He stood and walked to the window, watching Natalie's figure disappear down the tree-lined drive. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than numbness. It was small and fragile, but it was there, a reason to notice, a reason to care. Winter arrived early that year, wrapping the Ashford estate in frost and fog. Natalie's hands grew rough from the cold water and endless scrubbing, but she never complained. The extra money Vincent had given her bought Grace 3 months of treatment, 3 months of hope. Yet the disease was persistent. Hope had a price that kept rising. Natalie started arriving earlier and leaving later, taking on extra tasks without being asked. Linda noticed, but said nothing. The other staff members whispered about her dedication, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Nobody worked that hard without a reason, they said. But Natalie kept her head down and her troubles private. Vincent noticed too. He began finding small things out of place, signs of her presence that went beyond cleaning. Fresh flowers appeared in vases throughout the house. It's not expensive arrangements, but wildflowers picked from the estate grounds. Books in the library were organized by color, creating a rainbow across the shelves. The study smelled different, warmer somehow, like cinnamon and old paper. Cracks in the foundation one morning in late November. Vincent found Natalie sitting on the floor of the hallway outside his son's room. She was not crying, but her shoulders shook with silent sobs she was trying to contain. Her phone lay beside her, screen still glowing with what he assumed was bad news. He should have walked past. That was the protocol. But his feet stopped moving, and before he could think better of it, he sat down beside her on the cold marble floor. The gesture was so unexpected that Natalie's breath caught. "I apologize, Mr. Ashford," she whispered, wiping her face quickly. "This is unprofessional. I will leave immediately," Vincent said. The word came out rougher than he intended. "Please." They sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, birds called to each other through the fog. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked away seconds that felt suspended in time. My sister Natalie finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Grace, she has leukemia. The treatments are not working anymore. The doctors want to try something experimental, but insurance will not cover it, and I cannot afford it." Vincent listened without interrupting. He understood that sometimes people just needed to speak their pain aloud, to give it shape and form so it felt less overwhelming. "I have been saving everything," Natalie continued. "Working extra shifts at the diner downtown, selling what little we own. But it is never enough. The numbers just keep growing, and I keep falling further behind." She laughed bitterly. "I clean a mansion full of priceless things while my sister dies because I cannot pay for medicine." The truth unveiled, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "My son's name was Thomas. He was 7 when the accident happened. Catherine, my wife, was driving him to a piano recital. I was supposed to go with them, but I had a meeting I thought was too important to miss." Natalie turned to look at him, surprise replacing her grief momentarily. "A drunk driver ran a red light," Vincent continued, staring at the door to Thomas's room. "They both died instantly. The man who killed them walked away with minor injuries and a prison sentence that felt like an insult. I spent months trying to find someone to blame. The bar that served him, the company that made his car, the city for poor traffic light timing. Anyone but myself." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I built this empire on the idea that money could solve problems, that wealth meant control. but I could not buy back their lives. I could not purchase another chance to be there when it mattered. So I threw myself into work, into making more money, as if accumulating enough of it would fill the hole they left behind. Mr. Ashford, Natalie began, but he raised a hand gently. Vincent, he corrected. If we are sitting on the floor sharing our tragedies, titles seem ridiculous. Small smile flickered across her tear-stained face. Vincent. The library conversation that evening, Vincent did something he had not done in 3 years. He left his study early and went to the library where he knew Natalie would be finishing her work. She was on a ladder, dusting the top shelves, humming softly to herself. The sound was startling in a house that had been silent for so long. Natalie, he called up. Could you come down for a moment? She descended carefully, worry creasing her forehead. Is something wrong? Did I miss something? No, Vincent assured her. Everything is perfect. Perfect, actually. You do more than your job requires. I just want to help, she said simply. Why? Vincent asked. Why do you care so much about a house that is not yours? About a man you barely know? Natalie considered the question carefully, because I understand what it feels like when the world stops making sense. After our mother died, Grace and I lived in this fog where nothing felt real. Our apartment became a prison of memories. But then I started working here and I realized something. Taking care of this place, making it beautiful even when nobody seemed to notice, it gave me purpose. It made me feel like I was keeping something alive. Vincent felt something crack inside his chest. You were keeping me alive, he said quietly. I just did not realize it until now. The revelation they talked for hours that night, sitting in the leather chairs by the fireplace Vincent had not lit in years. He learned about Grace's love for painting, about how Natalie would sneak art supplies into the hospital. She learned about Thomas's fear of thunderstorms, about Catherine's talent for making everyone feel welcome in any room. I have been selfish, Vincent admitted as the fire burned low. Hiding in this mausoleum, pretending that isolation was the same as healing. But you have been here quietly bringing life back into these walls, and I was too blind to see it. You were surviving, Natalie replied. That is not selfishness. That is just being human. Vincent stood and walked to the window. The estate grounds were covered in snow now, white and pristine under the moonlight. How much does Grace need? For the experimental treatment? Natalie's face fell. Vincent, no. That is not why I told you. I was not asking for anything. I know, he said, turning to face her. But I am asking you. How much? She told him the number, and he did not flinch. It was substantial, but meaningless compared to his wealth. What mattered was the way Natalie's eyes filled with tears when he said he would handle it. I cannot accept this, she protested. It is too much. It is not nearly enough, Vincent countered. For 3 years, you have given me something I thought was lost. You made this house feel less empty. You reminded me that life continues even after loss. Let me give your sister a chance to continue hers. The night before Natalie left the mansion that night with a check that would save Grace's life and a heart that felt too full to contain. But as she walked through the snow-covered gardens, she heard footsteps behind her. Vincent approached, holding her coat she had forgotten. There is something else, he said, helping her into it. His hands lingered briefly on her shoulders. I have made arrangements with the hospital. Grace will receive the best care available from the best doctors in the country. But I have one condition. Natalie's breath caught. What condition? That you stop killing yourself trying to do everything alone, Vincent said. You have carried this burden long enough. Let me help carry it with you. Tears froze on her cheeks as she nodded, unable to form words. Vincent reached out and gently brushed them away, his touch careful and warm despite the cold. Thank you, she finally whispered. No, Vincent replied, his gray eyes holding hers. Thank you for reminding me that wealth without purpose is just loneliness with better furniture. They stood in the falling snow, two broken people who had found unexpected comfort in each other's pain. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, both felt ready to face it. The mansion loomed behind them, its windows glowing like lanterns in the dark. Inside those walls, ghosts still lingered, but they felt less heavy now. Love had not died there after all. It had just been waiting for someone brave enough to breathe life back into it. Dawn broke over the Ashford estate with unusual clarity, as if the snow had scrubbed the sky clean. Natalie arrived at work before sunrise, her heart racing with emotions she could not name. Everything felt different now. The mansion no longer seemed like a fortress of solitude, but a place where miracles had begun to unfold. Vincent was already awake, standing in the kitchen making coffee. The sight stopped Natalie in her tracks. In 3 years, she had never seen him in this part of the house. He looked almost ordinary in casual clothes, his hair slightly disheveled, his usual armor of expensive suits replaced by a simple sweater. "Good morning," he said, pouring a second cup without asking. He handed it to her, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch sent electricity through her skin. "Good morning," Natalie replied, accepting the coffee. It was perfect, exactly how she liked it. He had noticed, just as she had noticed everything about him over the years. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the snow-covered gardens in shades of gold and pink. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside this kitchen, time felt suspended in something precious and fragile. Grace's transformation, the experimental treatment, began immediately. Vincent had not just arranged for doctors, he had transformed an entire wing of the hospital into a specialized care unit. Natalie spent her mornings at the mansion and her afternoons at Grace's bedside. Watching her sister's strength slowly return, Grace noticed the change in Natalie immediately. "You look different," she said one afternoon, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Happier." "I am just relieved you are getting better," Natalie deflected, adjusting the blankets. "It is more than that," Grace insisted, her 16-year-old wisdom sharper than expected. "You have this light in your eyes." "Does this have something to do with the millionaire who is paying for everything?" Natalie felt her cheeks flush. "Vincent is just being kind." "Vincent," Grace repeated with a knowing smile. "You call him by his first name now. That is definitely something." Before Natalie could respond, the door opened. Vincent walked in carrying a large flat package wrapped in brown paper. His presence filled the small hospital room with an energy that made both sisters sit straighter. "I hope I am not intruding," Vincent said, his formal tone softening when he saw Grace. "You must be the artist I have heard so much about." Grace's eyes widened. "You know about my painting?" "Your sister talks about you constantly," Vincent replied, setting the package on the bed. "She mentioned you had to leave your supplies behind when you came here. I thought you might like these." Grace tore open the wrapping with trembling hands. Inside was a professional art set, the kind she had only dreamed about. Oils, acrylics, brushes of every size, canvases, and a portable easel. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at this stranger who had given her back her life and her passion. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to repay you." Vincent knelt beside the bed, his expression gentle. "Create something beautiful. That is payment enough." The dinner invitation 3 weeks later, Grace was discharged from the hospital. The doctors called it remarkable progress. Natalie called it a miracle. Vincent called it hope, manifesting into reality. To celebrate, Vincent did something unthinkable. He invited both sisters to dinner at the mansion, not as employee and employer, but as guests. Linda nearly fainted when he gave the instructions. The staff spent an entire day preparing, transforming the formal dining room that had sat empty for years to something warm and welcoming. Natalie arrived with Grace, both wearing their best dresses, which suddenly felt inadequate in the grandeur of the estate. But Vincent greeted them at the door himself. No butler, no formality, just genuine warmth in his eyes. "Welcome," he said, offering his arm to Grace, who still tired easily. "I am honored you could come." The dining table was set beautifully, but not ostentatiously. Candles flickered between arrangements of the same wildflowers Natalie had been placing throughout the house. The meal was simple, home-cooked food rather than fancy cuisine. Comfort rather than pretension. During dinner, Vincent asked Grace about her paintings. She described them with growing enthusiasm, her hands moving expressively as she talked about colors and emotions and the way light could change everything. Vincent listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he genuinely cared about her answers. Natalie watched them interact, her heart swelling with an emotion that terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. This man had become so much more than her employer. He had become her anchor, her partner in hope, and something deeper she was afraid to name: the West Wing after dinner. Grace fell asleep on the library sofa, exhausted but content. Vincent covered her with a soft blanket, his movements tender and careful. Then he turned to Natalie. "There is something I want to show you," he said quietly. "If you are willing." He led her through corridors she had never walked, past the boundaries Linda had established years ago. They stopped at a door marked by the stillness around it. The West Wing. The forbidden place. Vincent's hand trembled slightly as he turned the handle. "No one has been in here since the accident. I could not face it alone. But with you, I think I can." Inside was a world frozen in time. Thomas's room, exactly as he had left it. Toys arranged on shelves, books stacked beside a small bed, drawings taped to the walls. But beyond that was something unexpected. An art studio, clearly Catherine's, filled with unfinished paintings and the lingering scent of oil paint. Catherine was an artist, Vincent explained, his voice thick with emotion. Like Grace, she believed that creating beauty was the highest calling. She would have loved meeting your sister. Natalie moved through the space reverently, seeing the ghost of the woman who had lived here. The paintings were stunning, full of life and color and joy. One canvas sat on an easel, half-finished, a portrait of Thomas laughing in a garden. "This is what I could not face," Vincent continued. "All this life interrupted. All this beauty, unfinished. It felt like a judgment of my failures." "It is not a judgment," Natalie said softly, standing beside him. "It is a testament. They lived. They loved. They created. That does not disappear just because they are gone." Vincent looked at her, and in his eyes she saw years of pain beginning to crack open. "You have changed everything, Natalie. You walked into my life carrying your own grief, your own burdens, and somehow you made mine feel lighter. You did not try to fix me. You just stood beside me until I remembered how to stand on my own." "You did the same for me," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved Grace. You gave us hope when we had none left." "I gave you money," Vincent corrected. "You gave me something far more valuable. You gave me a reason to live instead of just exist." The unthinkable choice, the words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Vincent reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, his hand cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I know this is complicated," he said. "You work for me. There is a power imbalance. The world would have opinions. But I need you to know something. When I look at you, I do not see my employee. I see the woman who brought light back into my darkness. I see someone I want beside me, not because I need someone to clean my house, but because you make me want to live in it again." Natalie's breath caught. "Vincent, I feel the same way, but I am afraid. What if this changes everything? What if we lose what we have? What if we gain something better?" He countered. "I lost Catherine and Thomas because I prioritized the wrong things. I will not make that mistake again. Life is too short and too precious to waste on fear." He stepped back, giving her space. "I have made arrangements. Tomorrow, ownership of a property downtown will transfer to your name. It is a small gallery space with an apartment above. Grace can paint there, sell her work, live independently when she is ready. You will never have to worry about money or medical bills again. This is not conditional on anything. Whether you walk away from me tonight or stay, it is yours." Natalie stared at him in shock. "That is too much. I cannot accept that." "Can and you will," Vincent said firmly, "because this is not charity. This is me trying to build something meaningful with the wealth I have hoarded like a dragon. If you choose to walk away, at least I will know I did one thing right. I gave someone I care about the freedom to choose their own future." Tears streamed down Natalie's face. "You are giving me a way out." "Why would you do that?" "Because love is not about possession," Vincent replied. It is about wanting someone's happiness more than your own. If being with me would complicate your life or make you feel trapped, then I would rather set you free and know you are thriving somewhere else. The answer. Natalie looked around the studio. At the unfinished paintings and the evidence of love that death could not erase. She thought about Catherine, who had believed in creating beauty. She thought about Grace, who had been given a second chance at life. She thought about herself, standing in a mansion she had once only cleaned, now being offered a future beyond her wildest dreams. Then she looked at Vincent, really looked at him, at the man who had learned to feel again, at the person who had chosen compassion over comfort, at someone who saw her not as a service but as an equal partner in healing. I do not want freedom from you, she said finally. I want freedom with you. To choose this, to choose us. Not because of money or obligation, but because you make me feel seen in a way I never have before. Vincent's expression transformed, hope replacing the fear that had been shadowing his features. Are you certain? There is no pressure. Take time to think about it. I have thought about it every day for months, Natalie replied, stepping closer to him. Every time you left coffee exactly how I like it. Every time you noticed when I was struggling and found ways to help without making me feel small. Every time you looked at me like I mattered. I have been falling in love with you piece by piece, and I am tired of pretending I am not. Vincent closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with reverence. I have been in love with you since the day I found you crying in the hallway. And you were brave enough to share your truth with me. You reminded me that vulnerability is not weakness. It is the most courageous thing we can offer another person. When their lips met, it was not desperate or rushed. It was gentle and certain. A promise written in the language of two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate griefs. The kiss tasted of salt and hope, of endings and beginnings braided together. Outside the window, snow began to fall again, but inside the West Wing, warmth bloomed. Catherine's unfinished painting seemed to glow in the candlelight, as if blessing this new chapter. Thomas's drawings fluttered slightly in an impossible breeze, as if a child's laughter was echoing through time. 6 months later, the gallery opened on a spring morning when cherry blossoms painted the streets pink. Grace's paintings lined the walls, each one a testament to survival and beauty born from struggle. Natalie stood beside Vincent, their hands intertwined, watching people stream through the doors. The mansion was different now. Furniture had been rearranged. Windows stayed open. Music played in rooms that had been silent. Vincent had donated half his wealth to medical research and art programs, finding purpose in generosity. The West Wing remained a memorial, but it no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a bridge between past and future. Linda had cried when Vincent told her the truth about his relationship with Natalie, not from disapproval, but from joy. The whole staff had watched their employer come back to life. They celebrated the woman who had made it possible. Robert, Vincent's business partner, had been skeptical at first. But after meeting Natalie and seeing the transformation in his friend, he had become their biggest supporter. You found something money cannot buy, he told Vincent. You found someone who loves you despite your wealth, not because of it. Grace thrived in the gallery apartment, her health fully restored, her talent finally recognized. She painted Vincent and Natalie frequently, capturing the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Those paintings never went up for sale. They were too precious, too honest, too full of the love that had saved 3 broken people. The wedding they married in the mansion gardens under the same trees where Natalie had once picked wildflowers. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and the staff who had become family. Grace served as maid of honor. Her dress the same shade of blue as the sky in her paintings. Vincent's vows were simple, but devastating in their honesty. You taught me that grief does not have to be the end of the story. You showed me that love can bloom even in the coldest winter. You cleaned my house for years, but what you really did was clean the dust from my heart. I promised to spend every day earning the gift of your presence in my life. Natalie's vows made everyone cry. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You gave my sister life and gave me hope. But more than that, you let me see your broken pieces and trusted me to handle them with care. I promise to always be your safe place, your partner, your home. Not the mansion, but wherever we are together." When they kissed as husband and wife, cherry blossoms fell like snow, and somewhere in the vast sky, it felt like Catherine and Thomas were smiling down on this new beginning built from the ashes of old sorrows. The unthinkable truth that night. As they stood together on the balcony overlooking the estate, Natalie finally understood what had been unthinkable. Not the money, not the mansion, not even the second chance at happiness. The unthinkable act was that Vincent Ashford, a man who had spent years building walls to protect his shattered heart, had chosen to demolish them completely. He had given her not just material wealth, but emotional vulnerability. He had handed her the power to hurt him and trusted she would not, and she had done the same. Two people who had every reason to stay guarded had chosen openness instead. Two hearts that had been broken had risked breaking again for the chance at something real. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked, pulling her closer against the evening chill. "That love is the most unthinkable act of all," Natalie replied. "It defies logic. It ignores risk. It chooses hope when fear makes more sense. And somehow, against all odds, it works." Vincent kissed her temple. "It works because we chose it. Every day, in 1,000 small ways. That is what Catherine taught me. Love is not a feeling. It is a series of choices that build a life." Below them, the mansion glowed with warm light from every window. No more dark corridors. No more empty rooms. Just a home filled with laughter and music and the messy, beautiful chaos of living. Natalie had cleaned Vincent's house for years, but what he had done that night, and every night since, was truly unthinkable. He had opened his heart completely, risked everything, and built a future where two broken people became whole together. And that, more than any fortune or fairy tale, was the miracle they would spend a lifetime grateful for.